Hey everyone, it's Danny Curtin. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm doing a Serrapeptase Q&A because I received so many great questions on my last video about Serrapeptase and Tylenol. Make sure you check that out if you haven't already. So let's go ahead and get to the first question. Michelle McCoon 3809 writes, "What is in Serrapeptase? Thanks." Well, Michelle, there's nothing in Serrapeptase per se. It's a standalone natural enzyme that was originally discovered in the cocoons of silkworms. Researchers became interested in silkworms specifically because of how the cocoon, which is made out of silk, gets broken down when the worm transforms into a moth. Silk is one of the strongest fibrous proteins on the planet, but the delicate moths somehow emerge without damaging their wings or their bodies. Inside the cocoon was a specific type of bacteria, basically a probiotic that produces an enzyme capable of slowly dissolving the silk, but this enzyme is highly selective. The enzyme only breaks down dead or non-living material, which is why the moth itself is untouched. That enzyme was eventually named Serrapeptase, and it was made into a medicinal ingredient. Now, since it's able to break down dead silk, it's also able to break down other similar fibrous proteins like fibrin, which is the foundational protein for scar tissue, and other cardiovascular and inflammatory debris in humans. But again, the key attribute that makes Serrapeptase so effective is that it's selective in only digesting dead excess material. It leaves living and healthy tissue untouched. Thanks, Michelle. Hope that answers your question. Let's move on. Chug Bawamba states, Serrapeptase may increase bleeding risk, especially with blood thinners, cause allergic reactions or skin rashes, and in rare cases lead to lung inflammation, stomach upset, or liver inflammation with elevated liver enzymes. Examine carefully before taking. I'm sure better than NSAID and Tylenol. Thanks. Well, Chug Bawamba, those risks are maybe possible in theory, but I haven't found any documented cases that match that list of side effects. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that those aren't a possibility and that they don't exist, but I've looked and looked. So if you'd like to provide links, I'd be happy to review them. Enzymes do not thin the blood. Blood thinning drugs thin the blood and they prevent your blood from clotting, which is why they're called anticoagulants. Serrapeptase is completely different. It supports your body's natural cleanup process by breaking down excess fibrin, clearing dead tissue, and reducing leftover inflammatory proteins, especially around injured or irritated tissue. So it helps with the aftermath. It does not block the clotting process itself. Now, that said, anyone on prescription anticoagulants, or if you're preparing for surgery, you should definitely check with your doctor first just to be safe. Paul Elkins, 425, is there any evidence that it's effective against osteoarthritis, joint pain? If so, is it just an analgesic or does it help slow the progression of the disease? Also, does it work synergistically with nattokinase for this purpose, or would Serra on its own be better in this use case? Well, Paul, thank you for the great question, and here's what I can say. Enzymes are not a cure. Most people with inflammatory issues have what I would call an enzyme deficiency. So basically, they're low on enzymes, which clean up dead tissue and cellular waste. But if all of that cellular and inflammatory junk sticks around, the immune system is going to continue to attack all of that debris because it's foreign and it's trying to get rid of it. So what happens is that the entire immune reaction to injury, which includes inflammation, stays switched on. Because as far as the immune system can tell, the job isn't done. So this is a perpetual issue and the immune reaction never turns off. It just keeps smoldering. And this can really be said for almost anybody with an autoimmune issue. Now, as far as combining nattokinase and serrapeptase, I think that's a great idea. Those enzymes are synergistic and they both work much better when combined. Isa Lenardi 22 asks, can you take serrapeptase while doing a water fast? Would it enhance autophagy and other fasting benefits? Well, thank you, Isa. And I love this question. Autophagy is your body's internal cleanup system at the cellular level. Serrapeptase works at the extracellular tissue level, but it does have a similar purpose. By clearing out dead tissue and excess proteins outside of the cells, like in the blood for instance, you're going to reduce the overall burden on your detox systems. And when that happens, there's going to be less external waste, and your cells can focus more energy on internal repair, and autophagy will be far more effective. So in a nutshell, if you detox your system with serrapeptase, your cells can clean themselves internally through autophagy much easier. Thanks for that great question. Moving on, Bill's Huey 7422 writes, retired clinical pharmacist. Paracetamol overdose in the hospital was very common. Yes, thank you, Bill. This backs up my statement of how dangerous acetaminophen, paracetamol, or Tylenol, whatever you want to call it, is. I want to remind people that it's very easy to overdose because people mix medications without realizing it. For example, you might have a cold and a headache, and you take some cough syrup, not realizing it also contains acetaminophen for headache and fever. Before it even kicks in, you reach for some Excedrin for the headache, and later in the evening, you might take some NyQuil. That's a triple dose of this drug without ever knowing you stacked it. Thanks, Bill, for your real-life experience. Moving on, Blackhills4936 writes, I would like to see dosing recommendations, especially for chronic lower back pain. I use kratom, but the relief is only temporary and have to take it multiple times a day. Looking for something that fixes the systemic problem, so I'm going to try this. Thanks. Well, thank you, Black Hills. Let me just say, serrapeptase isn't dosed like painkillers. It's not a drug and it doesn't mask pain. It helps your body address the underlying cause. You've really got to think about this from a physiological perspective. When it comes to healing and recovery, the hardest part of the process is for your body to break down and clear out the dead, damaged tissue that's blocking real repair. This is exactly what serrapeptase helps with. Your immune system uses enzymes to dissolve old, dead, fibrous material so that your body can rebuild healthy tissue. Taking serrapeptase gives your body a massive dose of enzyme activity that it can use to support this process. As far as dosing goes, it really comes down to what you can handle. There aren't guidelines for specific diseases or injuries because, again, this is not a drug. Most people start with a lower dose, which would be in the area of 60 to 120,000 SPUs per day on an empty stomach. Now, for some, this may be enough, but for others that want more support, they typically would work up to 250,000, maybe as high as 500,000 SPUs per day. Now, this might sound like a lot, but remember, this is not a drug. Your body will use as much of this enzyme as it can, as long as there is old excess dead tissue to get rid of. If you get to the point where you're taking more than you need, the enzyme will simply go towards your daily protein needs because serrapeptase is, at its core, a specialized protein. Hope that clears it up. Next question. HBoone23 says, so you're saying Tylenol is only available because it was approved so long ago? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, HBoone. Any of you that are watching this and aren't familiar, I talked about how Tylenol wouldn't pass the FDA guidelines if it was brought to market today. So I referenced the FDA's guidance on drug-induced liver injury. It's called DILI. This guidance specifically states that drugs that harm the liver in the exact way that Tylenol does would be rejected during the approval process. But Tylenol was first approved in 1955, and the FDA's formal DILI, or drug-induced liver injury guidance, was only created in 2009. Essentially, Tylenol is grandfathered in under older drug approval rules. Isn't that swell? Next question. Linda Morgan, 2023 writes, will serrapeptase help with fluid in the lungs and around the heart? Doctor keeps saying just take Tylenol or an NSAID. Well, Linda, no. Enzymes like serrapeptase don't get rid of fluid buildup. Fluid around the heart and lungs is a serious condition that needs medical attention. Tylenol and NSAIDs might reduce discomfort, which is probably why your physician said to take those, but they don't address the cause either. I wish I had better news for you, but this question really is for your doctor. Let's move on. McLifer states, ordered some serrapeptase yesterday, hope it works. McLifer, I'm sure it will. Just make sure you stick with it. Most of the time when I hear about enzyme products not working, it's typically because the user didn't take the product long enough, or they bought a fake product on Amazon or eBay. So just make sure you get it from a place you trust, and I would give it at least a month before you assess whether you like the product or not. Moving on, Lori Coulthard 3812 says, excellent content. You spend a lot of time with facts. So welcomed. My husband takes the best nattokinase and has had great results. I would love to know what serrapeptase you recommend. Can't thank you enough. Well, Lori, thank you, and that's great to hear about your husband. As far as combining nattokinase and serrapeptase, I think that is a great idea. They complement each other very well. When it comes to a serrapeptase product, I always recommend choosing a high-activity formula from a reputable brand that lists the enzyme's potency in SPU, serrapeptase units. It shouldn't be in milligrams or IUs or some other measurement. Make sure it's SPU. Now, off the top of my head, I would go with a brand that is recognizable and has been around for a long time, like Enzymedica, Doctor's Best. Oh, and I don't want to forget Arthur Andrew Medical. In my nattokinase testing video, Arthur Andrew had the most potent and cleanest nattokinase product, so I would add them to the serrapeptase list as well. That said, I personally like taking systemic enzyme blends that combine high-dose nattokinase and serrapeptase, but there aren't very many out there. Doctor's Best and Solaray offer blends. They have both enzymes in them, but those are low activity. So those are great for beginners, but not the best over the long term. The product Nepronol AFD is really the strongest blend I've found with both nattokinase and serrapeptase in the formula. I'll leave links to all the products and companies that I talked about in this video today in the description below. Next question, Williams361 asks, okay, this is potential good news, but here's the thing. If serrapeptase is expensive or hard to get, I get suspicious. I think you said it's a natural substance. If so, it should be available in some foods. Why did you not mention that? All right, Williams, thanks for the question. And let me first say, serrapeptase is natural, but natural simply means it comes from nature. It's not a synthetic drug that was created in a lab. Now, as far as the price goes, I completely understand your concern. In my opinion, it really comes down to what you're comparing it to. You can take an inexpensive, synthetically made drug that covers up symptoms and has side effects, or you can take a natural substance that doesn't block symptoms. It gets to the root of the problem, but it costs more because it has to be grown and purified through a real fermentation process. So I hope that clears it up for you. Serrapeptase is easy to find online. I like using iherb.com, or you can find it at any natural health store. Next comment, Eugene Brida says, serrapeptase gives me diarrhea, thus am back to aspirin with a main meal to coat stomach. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but this is actually a sign that the enzyme is working. Remember, serrapeptase is going to help your body break down a lot of debris and dead tissue. That stuff has to go somewhere. If you want to give it another go, I would suggest you take a much smaller dose and take it for a long time so that you can bypass the detox process. If you're able to take a tiny dose and everything is stable, go ahead and gradually work your way up to your original dose. For instance, if you were taking 3 capsules of a product and it caused you to have loose stool, I would say only take 1 capsule or maybe even half of a capsule. I would only increase the dose every 3rd or 4th day so long as you don't have any issues. Great question. I really hope that helps you. Moving on, Deborah Wilson asks, I'm assuming serrapeptase can be found at natural health food stores or a trusted good source can be found online. Yes, you are assuming correctly. You can find serrapeptase in any health food store. You're not going to find it in a typical grocery or mainstream pharmacy. Stores like The Vitamin Shop, Natural Grocer, Sprouts, Whole Foods, all of those kinds of stores will definitely carry this enzyme product, and it's very easy to find online. Personally, I like ordering from iHerb or directly from a manufacturer's website. Any of the manufacturers that I mentioned earlier are a great choice. If you enjoyed this content, please make sure to like and subscribe and comment below. I'd love to hear what you think about serrapeptase. All of your questions are welcome too. Again, I'm Danny Curtin. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.